The daughter of wealthy parents disguised herself as a beggar to test her millionaire fiancé. No one expected how he would react. In life, it happens that it seems like everything one could wish for is there, but the feeling of happiness does not come. Such thoughts often visited Lola. Since childhood, she seemed to lack nothing. Her parents made sure their only daughter had everything. Fortunately, the family never experienced any financial need. Her father and mother met while still students and married immediately after graduation. From the very beginning, they decided to build their family business, and within a few years, they developed a well-known woodworking enterprise virtually from scratch. Later, several construction sites and branches in neighboring cities were opened. The family had substantial funds, yet in their hometown, Lola's parents were known as very modest and honest people, accustomed to living without much luxury or extravagance. While businessmen of their caliber bought yachts, airplanes, and expensive cars, Edgar Gordon, Lola's father, changed his car only a few times in his entire life, and even then because it had served its purpose. From childhood, her parents taught her to handle money carefully. Her dad used to say that money is not trash, and one shouldn't scatter it on nonsense, as it might repel prosperity. They don't lie on the road, Edgar Gordon would tell his daughter. You have to earn them, and that means you should appreciate every dollar. Any major purchase in the family was made thoughtfully and deliberately. If it was an apartment, it was spacious, well located. If a house, it was solid, bright, with a breathtaking view of the lake. Her parents bought Lola an apartment, but she rarely visited, preferring to stay close to her mother and father until she had her own family, which pleased them greatly. Stella, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for many years, helped take care of their home. Cleaning and cooking were her duties, while Lillian Harrison, Lola's mother, often tended to the garden herself. She loved working with flowers and spent all her free time there, which wasn't much. Since the business was first established, Lillian handled all the financial matters, so she was delighted when her daughter decided to follow in her footsteps. As soon as Lola finished school, the family council chose a university abroad where she easily gained admission. Lola enjoyed her studies and, being a sociable girl, tried to lead an active student life, participating in all the institution's events. While she never had difficulties in terms of socializing, she didn't want to discuss her personal life at all. For some reason, nothing serious ever worked out for her with the opposite sex. While her friends went on dates eagerly, she disappeared into libraries or wandered the streets of neighboring cities, admiring the architecture. Her student years flew by unnoticed, and Lola happily returned home. Everything seemed to be going well. With a good education, she joined her father's company and easily integrated into the team. She had a large number of wonderful friends both at home and abroad, but in love, misfortune continued to haunt her. Her parents frequently hinted at their desire for grandchildren. Once, her mother even casually admitted that when they sent her abroad, they simply dreamed that their daughter would meet her significant other there, but unfortunately, it didn't happen. Lola tried to avoid such conversations because she wasn't to blame for never finding someone she wanted to marry all this time. She often wondered what was wrong with her and couldn't find the reason. Outwardly, she was quite attractive. Refined facial features, a perfect figure, and long, well-groomed hair often drew admiring glances from the opposite sex, but not everyone dared to approach her. It was as if they were afraid of her beauty, and even if they did get acquainted, they treated her more like a friend. Of course, there were those who tried to develop closer relationships. Yielding to her parents' insistence, Lola even introduced her suitors to them a couple of times. However, each time, before things could properly develop, the relationships ended, and it wasn't her father or mother's fault. They were already prepared to accept any choice their daughter made, but Lola herself, after meeting several young men, understood most of them were only interested in her father's connections and money, and they didn't care about her feelings. No matter how hard Lola tried to settle her personal life, it always ended in a breakup. To avoid dwelling on her loneliness, she volunteered in all her spare time. She was well known at local shelters. The girl helped people and animals alike with pleasure. Even as a child, she always tried to help as long as she felt capable of doing so. In 5th grade, Lola brought home stray dogs several times. The housekeeper was distraught then. "Why do you keep bringing them all here? Can't you just leave every homeless one alone?" But her father just smiled and quickly put an end to her distress. "You can't save them all," he would say, winking at his daughter, "but these unfortunate ones, we can help. We have plenty of space. I'll ask the neighbor to build a kennel behind the house. Let them settle there." In such moments, Lola adored her dad. He always understood and supported her, no matter what she chose to do. About her volunteering, when he found out, he said, "Right, daughter. If you can help someone, do it. It's a good deed. Life works that way. Kindness, whether to a person or an animal, will come back to you someday." Lola believed him. After all, who better than her father knew what he was talking about? Edgar Gordon's company had been sponsoring a children's home near the city for many years. Everything the children had received in recent years was paid for by him. Edgar Gordon helped renovate the living quarters for the wards, bought computers for the classrooms, and provided a bus for group outings. And this was far from the complete list of so-called good deeds. In many ways, Lola resembled her father, and he was always proud of that. Once, leaving a shopping complex where she had stopped after work, Lola saw a young man, about her age, who had just bought a whole bag of groceries and placed it in front of an old man asking for alms. Lola stopped and watched what was happening. It was unusual for her. Usually, her peers, and the young man was about her age, tried to avoid the homeless or sometimes didn't notice them at all. Right away, the young man squatted next to the homeless man and spoke kindly to him, moving the bag closer to the bewildered old man. It was clear from the young man's face that there wasn't a hint of disgust. Seeing tears in the old man's eyes, he began patting him on the shoulder and whispering something softly, to which the old man responded with gratitude. All of this deeply moved Lola, prompting her to also help the old man. Taking out several bills from her wallet, she approached and placed them into the box in front of him. The old man looked at the young people as if not believing what was happening, quickly muttering something as he gathered his things. It was unclear whether he was praying or expressing gratitude, but tears streamed down his cheeks and a blissful smile lingered on his face. As if afraid it could all disappear, he tucked the money into his pocket and, picking up the bag, slowly disappeared into the nearest alleyway. Watching him go, the young man sadly remarked, "It's heartbreaking for these poor souls. No home, no family, no proper food. Maybe he'll have a decent meal for a couple of days. I tried to get a little of everything for him. By the way, my name's Sam." Lola introduced herself and expressed surprise at his willingness to help people in such a way. "I thought hardly anyone these days would do such things," she smiled. "I just can't pass by such unfortunate souls without feeling my heart bleed. I want to help each one of them." "Do you know what?" Suddenly, in a conspiratorial tone, Sam said, "Let's celebrate our meeting at a wonderful cafe nearby. It's very cozy, with a great kitchen and the best coffee. But please, let me cover everything. I insist on treating such a beautiful lady to dinner." Lola couldn't refuse. She had already taken a liking to Sam from the first moments. And such a handsome man simply couldn't help but be appealing to her. Standing nearly 6 feet tall with a perfect athletic figure, he looked like he stepped off the cover of a magazine. The cafe where Sam took her was indeed wonderful. Soft lighting, unobtrusive quiet music, beautiful decor, all conducive to conversation. It turned out that the young man was knowledgeable about wines and, like Lola, loved seafood. When she learned that their culinary preferences matched, she set the menu aside with a smile and said, "Order as you see fit, I trust you completely." By the way he confidently placed the order, unconcerned with the prices, she understood that he definitely had no financial constraints. Over dinner, they talked a lot, covering a wide range of topics. Sam wasn't eager to talk much about himself, but over the course of the evening, she did learn that his parents lived abroad and ran their own quite profitable business, and he helped his father manage it here at home. Lola couldn't believe that such a handsome, wealthy man was also unmarried. But without waiting for a question about his personal life, Sam himself casually began to talk about it. "I did have a girlfriend," he began sadly. "We even planned to get married. At first, she was against how much time I devoted to shelters and the unfortunate souls living there. And then, her materialistic desires began to surface quite strongly. Quitting her job, she decided she could live off my income. I don't mind a woman not working, but shouldn't there be some hobby or passion? And responsibility for creating comfort at home should also be important to her. But none of that interested her." Lola, listening to him, couldn't believe that such an ideal man wasn't a dream, but was sitting right in front of her in reality. Parting that evening, Sam asked for her phone number and added, "Lola, I really don't want to let you go. You're simply amazing and very kind-hearted. I would love to see you again. Will you allow me to take you out on a date?" Returning home, Lola was elated. She wanted to sing "Dance with Joy" because this was the kind of young man she had only dreamed of being with. She couldn't sleep all night. She was afraid to admit to herself that she had fallen in love at first sight, like a schoolgirl. This wasn't her first experience interacting with young men, of course. But someone who shared so much with her in terms of outlook on life, worldview, and interests, this was a first. Until morning, Lola lay happily smiling, imagining their next meeting. She was willing to do anything just to bring that moment closer. On the appointed day, Sam pulled up to her house, handed her a bouquet, and said, "I ask you not to ask questions and simply give me a few hours. I think you won't regret it." He smiled mysteriously, and in that moment, Lola's heart skipped a beat, thinking she was ready to spend not just a few hours, but a day, a year, and perhaps her whole life with him. She tried to push these thoughts away, fearing that like past relationships, these could reveal themselves quite differently over time, but her heart wouldn't be commanded. During the drive, Sam looked at her with such tenderness that Lola's soul sang with happiness. Along the way, they chatted, and the young man began to tell her how since childhood he had tried to help those in trouble. "You wouldn't believe how many cats and dogs I brought home," he said with a smile, and Lola burst out laughing. "You won't believe it, but I was just the same," she said, looking at Sam. "Dad even built a kennel in the backyard for the stray dogs I brought home." Further in their conversation, Sam surprised her even more, saying that for several years he had been helping orphanages and shelters. Meeting him already seemed fateful, because they had so much in common that it couldn't be just a coincidence. When they stopped by the shore of a beautiful lake, Sam mysteriously said, "Now you'll get to meet my favorites. I try to visit them as often as possible. I look, admire, and dream of finding such love and tenderness." Listening to him, Lola was afraid to move. She couldn't believe such coincidences. This person was like her twin, but in a male form. "Let's go. I think you'll like it here," Sam said, gallantly opening the car door for her. The lake was so clean that it seemed you could see its bottom if you wanted to. Near the shore, two swans swayed on the water surface. They approached and then moved away, but they never drifted apart, as if they were tied together. "Look how he protects his beloved," Sam pointed to the slightly darker swan. Observing, she really noticed that the gray swan followed his snow-white beloved everywhere, as if trying to protect her. It looked very touching, and the lake itself was amazing. The purest air, complete silence, and fairy tale nature only gave positive emotions. Sam suggested sitting on a bench crafted by someone's caring hands. They sat there for a long time, talking about everything under the sun. Lola looked at the young man as if he were a fairy tale and very romantic prince. There was so much warmth and tenderness in him that she suddenly wanted to nestle up to him and never let go. As if hearing her thoughts, he took off his jacket and gently draped it over her shoulders, then softly said, "You're shivering. How about we go to some cafe? We'll sit, warm up." But Lola looked up at him and, with a pleading tone, replied, "Let's sit here a bit longer. It's so nice and calm here. I don't even want to leave." At that moment, Sam unexpectedly took her face in his hands and kissed her, and Lola, embracing him, wrapped her arms around his neck and responded to his kiss. At that moment, she didn't want to think about anything else. Logically, she knew she didn't know much about this person yet, but her heart and soul screamed that he was the one, the only one she had been waiting for so long. They spent that day together, and Lola felt like the happiest person in the world. In the evening, as they said goodbye, he took her hands in his and said, "I can't imagine how I could live without you anymore. I'll miss you so much tomorrow, but I have to leave. Once a week, I visit orphanages. The kids are already waiting for me there, knowing I'll bring them gifts. Take me with you," Lola unexpectedly suggested. "I want to help them too." But Sam hesitated for a moment, then quickly replied, "Let's do it another time, later. Although you can help them now. There's still a lot those poor kids need, and those willing to help donate funds to my account, and I check with the orphanage director what to bring on my next visit." Without a second thought, Lola happily transferred a decent sum, asking to inform her if more was needed so she could repeat the payment. Although since that day, Lola couldn't wait for him to ask. Each time her beloved went to the orphanage, she transferred money to him. They started dating almost every day. Sam gallantly courted her, showered her with flowers, and several times confessed his love, which made Lola glow and feel like the happiest person alive. Her parents, noticing the drastic changes in her behavior, decided to talk during dinner. Her mother started first. "Maybe you could tell us, along with your father, what's behind that magical sparkle in your eyes? You're positively radiant from within." In his usual manner, her father squinted playfully and added, "Yes, indeed. We'd love to meet this wizard who has managed to change our daughter so much." Lola couldn't resist and recounted everything in detail. She spoke so enthusiastically about Sam that at the end of her monologue, Edgar, looking at his wife, said with relief, "Well, dear, it seems we've finally got there. Our daughter has fallen in love. And since that's the case, I propose we invite this Prince Charming over for dinner tomorrow. What say you, my lovely ladies?" Lillian, seeing how happy her daughter was, immediately embraced the idea. "I'll ask Stella tonight," she said. "Let her help me prepare for this occasion. We'll meet your knight in shining armor tomorrow around 5. I think that time will suit everyone." Immediately after dinner, Lola called Sam, who happily accepted the invitation. She spent the next day in great anticipation. Not because she feared her parents wouldn't like him, but simply because she wanted this evening to be extraordinary for some reason. In the evening, Sam arrived precisely on time, a detail her father immediately noted, greatly valuing punctuality. As soon as their guest appeared at the door, Lillian approvingly looked at her daughter, signaling her agreement with Lola's choice. Sam was, as always, impeccable. His expensive suit perfectly accentuated his athletic figure. In his hands were 2 large, tastefully arranged bouquets, one of which he handed to Lillian, gallantly kissing her hand. The second he gave to Lola, looking at her with loving eyes, a detail her parents also immediately noticed. Edgar Gordon handed Sam a gift package. "Sorry, I didn't know your preferences. I chose according to my own taste. This is a very good whiskey, brought on my request from abroad. I think you'll enjoy this divine drink." Lola saw that Sam had immediately won her parents over from the first moments, and she was very happy about it. The evening turned out to be truly warm and heartfelt, as her father later remarked. "We had a good time, like a family. It feels like we've known this charming young man for 100 years. To this, Sam, looking at Lola, unexpectedly addressed her parents. "Edgar Gordon, Lillian Harrison, honestly, I didn't believe in spontaneous meetings and love at first sight, but that was before I met Lola. Since meeting your daughter, I haven't spent a day without thinking about her. And today, on such a wonderful day, I ask for your daughter's hand." There was a pause. The parents looked at each other, clearly not expecting this turn of events. Edgar Gordon looked at his daughter and realized that this declaration was also a surprise for her. He smiled and, turning to Sam, said, Why not? As long as Lola is happy. Start with asking her. The young man stepped towards Lola and extended a hand, holding a velvet box containing a ring with beautifully sparkling diamonds. Lola didn't even realize how or when he got it. Without waiting for any words, she quietly said, "I agree. I can't live without you anymore." "Well, that's wonderful," her father exclaimed joyfully. Addressing his wife, he added, "There you go, dear. We've waited for this. We can start preparing for the wedding, and who knows, maybe we'll be blessed with grandchildren." The parents' mood noticeably improved, and it was clear they were genuinely happy for their daughter. As they said their goodbyes that evening, Edgar Gordon shook Sam's hand and said, "We'll be happy to welcome you into our family. One can only dream of such a son-in-law. We hope you won't disappoint us, and our daughter will be happy with you." From that moment on, all the free time of the young couple was occupied with pleasant activities. The main organizational questions regarding the banquet were taken care of by the parents, leaving the young couple to handle the purchase of outfits, rings, and other pleasant wedding attributes. Sam continued to visit the children's homes, promising Lola that he would definitely take her with him after the wedding. Meanwhile, Lola, busy with wedding preparations, supported him financially by transferring substantial sums for the children's needs. Every day, she literally thanked God for bringing her together with such a wonderful, kind-hearted person. Sam couldn't walk past anyone in trouble, whether a starving beggar or an abandoned puppy. It seemed he wanted to help everyone, and Lola always supported him in this. But one day, completely by chance, she saw a horrifying scene from a supermarket window, which she couldn't initially believe. She rarely visited this area, and Sam, who happened to be across from the store, apparently didn't expect to see her. Lola was in shock as she watched her kind, caring, compassionate lover screaming at a homeless man who accidentally bumped into him. Pushing the defenseless old man, he then struck him several times with a leather folder he was carrying. But he didn't stop there. He kicked the poor man's bag with all his might, causing its simple contents to spill out under the wheels of passing cars. After yelling something else at the beggar, he walked away, leaving Lola standing in bewilderment at the store exit, trying to make sense of what she had just witnessed. All the way home, she could only think about Sam's abrupt change in behavior. It was as if there were two completely different people. Could this be some sort of twin brother of his? At some point, she came up with a plan. Lola decided to visit the children's home where Sam used to go the very next day. She couldn't believe that a person so passionate about helping abandoned children could attack an elderly person. Sam had casually mentioned addresses where he went, and those details stuck in her mind. Returning home, Lola refused dinner, citing a headache. She didn't want to upset her parents prematurely. They would have immediately sensed that something was wrong. They knew their daughter too well, especially her father. Upon learning about the situation, he would have raised all sorts of security concerns, and who knows how it would have ended. Lola decided to clarify everything herself. Early next morning, she made her way to a neighboring town where one of the mentioned Sam's children's homes was located. Intending to conceal the purpose of her visit, she greeted the institution's director with charm and said, "Hello, I'm Sam's assistant who visits you on Wednesdays. He asked me to find out how else we can help and whether the phones he bought last week were liked by the kids." The woman looked at her with surprise and replied suspiciously, "We would certainly welcome any help, but we don't know any Sam, and no one has brought us any phones. Occasionally, some amounts are deposited into our accounts, but they are not substantial, clearly from sympathetic relatives of our children." They talked for a while longer. The director complained about the orphanage's problems, and despite her thoughts, Lola decided to take down the account number, intending to help later. Her main concern at that moment was Sam's lies. It seemed that everything she had sent him was used for other purposes. She didn't even need to visit the second children's home, located 100 kilometers away from their city, to verify this. While Lola was talking to the director, her phone in her purse was constantly ringing. Glancing at the screen, she saw that Sam was calling. She had completely forgotten that she had agreed to have lunch with him at the restaurant where their wedding was supposed to take place. After a quick farewell, she hurried back to town. She was eager to expose the liar. Seeing Lola enter the room, Sam rushed towards her and anxiously asked, "Darling, can you really scare me like that? You said yesterday that you weren't feeling well, and today you're not picking up the phone. I already called Edgar, and he said he has no idea, but you disappeared somewhere. What happened? Where were you? I'm worried." Sitting down at their favorite table, which Sam had already taken, she unexpectedly replied to him, "I was in the neighboring town, Sam. I decided to check if the children in the orphanage had enough phones from last week, and also to make sure that the new furniture in the younger group's bedroom is as good as you described." As she spoke these words, Lola looked closely at her former lover and was amazed by his composure and resourcefulness. Not a muscle twitched on his face. He simply cheerfully said, "You know, I've been having unexpected situations for the past 2 weeks. The first time, when I was supposed to buy furniture, I never made it to them. Halfway there, my father's company called urgently for a meeting with local partners. I had to turn back. And the next time, I decided to surprise you and arranged a meeting at a travel agency to plan a romantic trip for us. You see, my soul was hurting from unfulfilled promises to the children, so I decided to transfer some money to the orphanage's account and ended up mixing up a few digits. I'm sorting out this issue at the bank now, but as soon as it's resolved, we'll go there together." Lola silently listened to this nonsense, then calmly said, "The thing is, darling, they basically don't know any Sam sponsor there, and you weren't there a month or 2 ago. You've never been there at all." Her words made the liar pause, leading Lola to think that a great actor had died in him. Dramatically banging his fist on the table, he, again without losing his composure, immediately started indignantly, "I'm not helping under my real name there. I don't like boasting about good deeds, so that later no one says I do it for self-promotion." After saying this, he put on a hurt expression, indicating that his fiancée's distrust was unpleasant to him. Then, taking a sip of water from the glass on the table, he suddenly smiled and, taking Lola's hand, affectionately said, "Lola, why would I lie to you? I swear, I have nothing to hide from you. You know how much I love you. Let's not argue and just have lunch and discuss wedding matters." Lola really wanted to believe everything he said, but there were too many inconsistencies. Deciding to use another fact, she looked directly at Sam and asked, "You know, I'd like to believe all this, but I can't. Just as someone who almost kisses any beggar in front of me, how could he yell and hit another poor old man at the supermarket? It's fortunate you had a folder with documents in your hands and not a bat, or else the poor guy would surely not have survived. Or will you say that didn't happen either?" Lola hoped to catch her fiancé off guard with this, but it turned out she didn't know him well enough. He immediately had an answer for this too. "Are you following me? Well, clearly, you didn't see everything. That scoundrel almost snatched my wallet from me. I stopped to give him money, but as soon as he saw how much money I had, he decided to snatch everything he could. Believe it or not, he took it." Lola didn't quite believe him. It was hard for her to imagine that a frail old man barely standing on his feet would dare such a thing. At that moment, she realized that arguing with Sam was a waste of time, and she had no desire to be around him at the moment. Refusing lunch and citing feeling unwell, Lola asked him not to call her for a couple of days. "I'm sorry," she said, bidding him farewell, "but I need some time alone." Returning home, the girl spent the whole evening locked in her room, thankfully while her parents were still at the office. She thought about what had happened during the day. Sam seemed to have answers for everything, and maybe some of it was true. But something prevented her from believing him. In one moment, it suddenly dawned on her. Lola grabbed her phone and began dialing a number. When someone answered on the other end, she joyfully said, "Lucy, I'm so glad you're in town. Knowing your schedule of performances, I was afraid I wouldn't catch you. You're always either at concerts or on tour. I have an important matter for you." Can I come over tomorrow morning? We can catch up then. She had known Lucy since school. She knew that Lucy had graduated from theater school and could help her with the plan she had concocted. After getting agreement for the meeting, she asked her father in the morning to allow Calvin, one of his security guards, to accompany her supposedly on business. Edgar Gordon wasn't particularly surprised because often when Lola went somewhere where there might be difficulties, her father would assign a guard to accompany her, explaining, "You know, darling, you can go shopping alone, but serious meetings require serious escort. How does it look? They judge by appearance. You arrive with a driver, security, and they look at you entirely differently." In the morning, as Lola walked with Calvin to the car, she stopped and, with pleading eyes, quietly said, "Calvin, darling, I really need your help today, but not for business. No one should know about this." The gray-haired man put on a serious look, but Lola knew him too well. He had worked for her father since she was 6 years old. A combat officer who had been in many hotspots, he had been discharged after a serious injury. At that time, Edgar was looking for a bodyguard. Here he responded to the ad. Lola knew from childhood that behind Calvin's stern appearance hid the kindest person. Gloomily looking at her, he asked just as quietly, as if he was already joining in the plan she had devised, "What have you cooked up, girl? Want to drag me into some adventure in my old age? I won't make it with you until retirement. You see, if Edgar Gordon fires me, I'll be left without support." Lola smiled and immediately replied, "Don't worry, Calvin, you won't starve, but I really need your help. Just let the driver go. Say you can handle it yourself. I don't like him. He'll report everything to Dad right away. He'll say where we were, what we did, and no one should know about this. We're going to see my friend now, and I'll explain everything to both of you there." Calvin quickly settled the issue with the driver, and within half an hour they were approaching Lucy's apartment door. The friend was already waiting and immediately suggested discussing everything over a cup of coffee. Calvin declined, citing pressure, and settled into an armchair, while Lola began telling about her acquaintance with Sam, about the transfers to his account supposedly for the orphanage's help. Then she confessed that seeing him hit a beggar made her unable to believe it. Skipping over some details, she talked, and soon Lucy and Calvin were fully briefed on her entire story. Then, quickly explaining her plan, she looked at both of them and added, "But I can't do it without your help. Lucy, you graduated from theater school, so you definitely know how to disguise me as a beggar woman. Preferably much older than I am. And you, Calvin, I know, stern, tough, and fair. If needed, you can protect me and then scare this scoundrel. I know where he hangs out and where he goes to eat. That's where we'll catch him." Calvin, having listened to everything, shook his head sadly and then kindly said, "Well, how could I leave you hanging? Edgar Gordon would have my head if anything went wrong." When everything was done as planned, Lola didn't recognize herself in the mirror. She was being looked at by an old woman with a mass of wrinkles visible under a thick layer of what looked like dirt or soot. Dry, tangled gray hair stuck out from under a ragged hat. Her clothes were even worse, all torn. Lola was satisfied with this transformation, and they immediately set off to find him. Dropping Lola off a couple of blocks from the desired location, the bodyguard didn't take his eyes off her, watching from the car. They didn't have to wait long. Literally 10 minutes later, Sam's car pulled up to the cafe where Lola was stationed. Without waiting for him to get out, Lola, in her beggar guise, limping on one leg, approached him. Her friend had wisely suggested putting a couple of nuts in her mouth, which made her speak with a strong lisp as she said, "Sonny, spare some change. Haven't eaten for days. Or maybe buy some groceries." Without even looking at the old woman, he shouted disdainfully, "Get lost. Go where you were going, or I'll call the cops right now. People like you are useless. Should just get rid of you." Saying that, the guy entered the expensive cafe, while Lola, stepping aside, removed the hat along with the wig and, taking out a pristine white handkerchief from the pocket of her ragged outfit, began wiping off the makeup, which was now running down her cheeks with tears. Calvin understood everything without words. It was his moment in this scenario. Disappearing through the cafe door, he returned a minute later with Sam. Subtly winking at Lola, who was watching from the sidelines, he drove away with the failed groom while she got into Lucy's car, which had just arrived to pick her up. They had agreed beforehand that once Calvin had taken this imposter away, the girls would return to Lucy's place and wait. It took more than 2 hours before the bodyguard returned and began recounting the events. "Your fiancé is quite the coward. You should have seen how scared he was when I turned towards the forest. I told him we were heading to Edgar Gordon's regarding wedding matters. When I turned off into the woods, I just clicked the gun's lock, and he squealed like a stuck pig. He panicked. Didn't even need to stage a mock execution. Turns out, your fiancé is a fraudster. Ever wonder where he gets the money for fancy cars, restaurant lunches, clothes, and gifts for silly girls like you? He found rich older ladies, charmed them. They were ready to give everything to this scammer. He didn't tell you where he met you, but once he realized your family background, he decided to play big. It would have been ideal to see the wedding through, but greed got the best of him. He wasn't lying to you when he begged for money. You might have ended up marrying him, and who knows how that would have ended. The homeless trick, by the way, he had planned for a while. He identified your weaknesses, especially your kindness, and decided to exploit it. What can you expect from someone whose parents are alcoholics? Kids like that usually either kill or steal. So, as they say, thank God you weren't the first. By the way, the police thanked me too when I brought this con artist in." Lola seemed like she should be relieved that the deception had been uncovered, but deep down, she felt very bad. She wanted to cry out of pity for herself. For the first time in many years, she had truly fallen in love, only to be left alone again in the end. That same evening, Lola told her parents what had happened, and it seemed to her that they were even more upset by what had occurred than she was. Her mother cried. Her father quietly gave her medicine and urged her to calm down, saying, "Lillian, don't worry. It's good that everything came to light before the wedding. And thank God, no pregnancy. So, he wasn't the right match for Lola. I'll make sure that scoundrel gets punished to the fullest extent of the law." Edgar Gordon indeed took control of everything. Sam was soon tried and sent to a nearby facility. His illegal actions contributed to him receiving a substantial sentence, and the funds Lola had transferred were partially recovered. It wasn't the entire sum, but most of it returned to Lola's account soon enough. However, this didn't make her feel any better. For a while, she couldn't find peace. She felt like her life was over, and she swore she would never trust another man again. Then, after thinking it through, she decided that meeting this fraudster wasn't just a coincidence. She saw it as a sign and resolved to help the orphanages that her failed fiancé had lied about. Deciding to find out the details and what specifically the children needed most, she returned to the place she had visited before. The director greeted her like an old friend. After they toured the entire facility, the director timidly asked, "Do you know, Lola, we could use some upgrades for the gym and renovations for the changing rooms. Joseph would be delighted. He's a graduate of our institution. He comes here to teach judo to the boys for free. It would be great to equip everything properly and get them uniforms, even if they are on the cheaper side. By the way, they're having a session today. Let me introduce you." The coach turned out to be a very open and straightforward guy, a couple of years older than Lola herself. The children were glued to him, and Lola was amazed at how easily he interacted with each of them. She decided to observe the sessions and then approached him, asking, "Joseph, could you please tell me what is most needed to ensure your sessions run smoothly?" Joseph, seeming somewhat skeptical, asked, "Are you a social worker? There are a few things lacking here for proper sessions. Or is this just for show, to say you visited and everything's working?" Lola decided he had given her a good reason to visit this place more often. She started coming every chance she got, wanting to see Joseph again. She felt that her wound from Sam hadn't healed yet, but she was ready to start a new relationship. She really liked Joseph. He was completely different from her failed fiancé. Joseph was reserved but very open in communication, a bright, kind person whom Lola wanted to see every day. Afraid of making another mistake, she decided not to reveal her true identity, asking the director to support her story about being a social worker. She wanted to be loved not for her wealth, but for her soul. Lola decided she would play this role until the end. Meeting Joseph again, they discussed the budget needed, made plans for the work, and after that, the coach said, "Lola, how would you feel about taking a walk in the park? There's a lovely place nearby where I like to wander. I used to sneak off there as a boy, though I always came back. Ancient trees, birds singing. I think you'd enjoy it." They spent hours strolling, finding topics for conversation constantly. Lola noted how easy it was to talk with Joseph, but the fear of starting a new relationship made her cautious. Joseph wasn't like anyone she had known before. Despite his orphan past, he was well-read and polite. Listening to him brought Lola pleasure. She maintained the facade of a regular social worker. Each visit to the orphanage involved careful consideration of her attire, hairstyle, and makeup. She was afraid to hint to Joseph that she was from a wealthy family. She wanted any potential relationship to start on equal footing. Seeing that Joseph believed her fabricated biography, Lola diligently kept up the charade. At one point, she even started to enjoy playing the role of a simple woman. She and Joseph began dating. They wandered the streets for hours, went to the movies, and kissed in the back row. It was nothing like dates with men who were after her wealth. Those men tried to impress her with expensive restaurants and lavish bouquets, but none of it compared to Joseph's simple and sincere feelings toward her. Only with him could they feed ducks at the pond, watch the sunset from the roof of the orphanage, and kiss without a care in the world. Lola was afraid of spoiling her happiness, not daring to think about what would come next. Yet deep down, she dearly hoped that her relationship with Joseph would forever remain light and romantic. Their joint effort in renovating the gym and buying necessary equipment brought them even closer. As they chose gym equipment, laughing together, they tried out each item. Joseph took on the role of coach, and Lola diligently spun pedals, tried to lift weights, and followed his every instruction. After such walks, Lola would return home, take a shower, and happily fall asleep with a smile on her face. Her parents, remembering how deeply she had suffered from the breakup with Sam, were very concerned for her. On one hand, they saw Lola glowing with happiness. But on the other hand, they remembered how similar situations had ended in the past. They didn't ask questions or request to meet her new suitor. They simply decided to wait silently for their daughter to make the right decision on her own. Meanwhile, Lola seemed to continue living her previous life, working and volunteering at other shelters, but eagerly anticipating her trips to the orphanage where Joseph coached the children. Yet all her thoughts revolved around one person who had become important to her. She knew for sure that when she entered the gates of the orphanage, from the second floor, through one window, a pair of sky-blue eyes would be looking at her. She had met Dennis during her first visit, while trying to uncover Sam's schemes. The 4-year-old boy had approached her at the entrance to the orphanage, timidly asking, "Ma'am, are you here to pick a son? Take me. I can wash floors, peel potatoes, and I hardly ever cry." That time, he had followed her like a shadow. While she met with the director, he waited for her, then walked her all the way to the gate. As a parting remark, he asked in a surprisingly mature tone, "You didn't pick anyone? That's okay. I'll wait for you. You're nice and very pretty." Those words echoed in her ears all the way home. And when she returned after some time, she brought Dennis gifts. Since then, every time she visited the orphanage, he was the first person she wanted to see. When Joseph learned about their friendship, he laughed and said, "I have a serious competitor. I thought you only liked me, but it turns out there's another gentleman on the horizon. By the way, He's a great kid, smart and capable. I think another year, and he'll be my best student." For almost half a year, Lola kept her relationship with Joseph and her visits to the orphanage hidden from her parents. But when the young man proposed to her, she was taken aback. After all, to him, she remained a simple employee of a charitable institution, visiting the orphanage. She was afraid to confess that she came from a very wealthy family. Lola feared that Joseph would immediately leave her, because unlike her previous suitors, he disliked lies and did not consider inherited money a gift. Like Lola's father, he believed that every dollar should be earned through hard work and spent wisely. Despite lacking a formal education, he had independently opened a small martial arts club, which he developed in his spare time, coming to the orphanage. After Joseph proposed to her, Lola decided to tell him everything about herself. He listened quietly and then looked up, saying softly but firmly, "You know, I don't care whether I have money or not. I don't need it. I only need you. I love you very much and I ask you to be my wife. With one condition, our wedding will be quiet and modest, without fanfare or extravagance. And it's not because I'm afraid to spend money. Yes, I may not have as much as your parents do, but I simply believe that happiness loves quietness." Lola, holding onto his chest, quietly cried and whispered, "I agree. I don't need this wedding at all. Just as long as you're by my side." On that day, she returned home earlier than usual. It was a day off, and her parents were deep in conversation over coffee. Seeing their daughter at the threshold, they exchanged surprised glances, and her father asked, "Something happened? We weren't expecting you home before dinner. You usually have business to attend to, and that usually takes until around 9. Lola looked mischievously and said, "Mom, Dad, I'm not alone. I came to tell you that I'm getting married. And also, in a couple of weeks, when everything is sorted out with the paperwork, you'll have your first grandchild. Although I've decided to introduce you all today. Boys, come in." Joseph entered the room, followed timidly by Dennis. For a few moments, silence hung in the room. Then, Edgar Gordon stood up from his chair and walked over to Joseph, extending his hand. "Well then, let's get acquainted. Please come in," he said with a smile. "Lillian, let's set the table. We have such guests in the house." As if coming to her senses, Lillian Harrison stood up and immediately approached Dennis, who looked frightened. "Well, grandson, what's your name?" she asked gently, hugging him. "Dennis," the boy replied barely audibly. "All right, then for us, you'll be Grandpa's Denny." Lillian smiled and, lifting him up, added, "Let's go help me prepare dinner for all these relatives. You'll sit nearby and tell me about yourself." That evening, Lola felt that their home was somehow warmer and more joyful. Her parents welcomed the young men very well and fully supported their daughter's choice. Of course, they weren't very happy about the decision for a quiet and modest wedding at first, but then her father said, "Indeed, who needs it? It's all show. The main thing is love. Look at Lillian and me after university, we got married without any guests. Just went to a cafe and bought all kinds of ice cream. We stuffed ourselves silly, remember?" Joseph looked at Lola, then at everyone else, and said, "I know that cafe. It's right across from our house now. They have amazing desserts and a huge variety of ice cream. I propose we sign the papers and have a family gathering there. Who's in favor? Please raise your hands." Everyone enthusiastically applauded, and Dennis cheered and clapped the loudest. A few months later, within a couple of days of each other, several documents appeared in the family. The first confirmed Dennis' adoption. The second was the marriage registration of Lola and Joseph. And the third, which stirred up a lot of emotions for everyone, was the ultrasound result indicating that Lola was pregnant. Looking at her parents, Lola felt that they had somehow grown younger after her wedding. Now, all their free time could be spent fussing over their grandson and joyfully preparing the room for the arrival of their granddaughter.